Hello and welcome to English Story Vault. You're learning English? Fantastic. Let's learn English together with a really interesting story. Before we dive in, please don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a comment. The troubled region, let's get started. The Middle East is a region often associated with war and conflict. For about 100 years, fighting has been a constant presence. It truly feels like conflict is always happening here. In recent years, major wars have erupted in countries like Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Palestine, and Yemen. Many nations within the Middle East have been involved in these conflicts. Global involvement in human-cost countries from outside the region, such as the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and Russia, have also gotten involved. These wars have had a devastating impact on people. Millions have died because of the fighting, and millions more have lost their homes and been forced to flee. They've become refugees, seeking safety in other countries. These wars also come with an enormous financial cost. The Middle East remains a very troubled part of the world today. Why is this region like this? Why is there always fighting? It's a difficult question with complex answers. A look back in time to understand why the Middle East faces so many problems today. We need to look back in history, more than 100 years. Long ago, the map of the Middle East was very different. Decisions about country borders were made after a major war. These old decisions about where countries begin and end have caused long-standing problems. These borders are one crucial reason for the ongoing wars and suffering. We'll explore how these borders were created and why they still matter. Old empires and new ambitions for many centuries. The Ottoman Empire was an incredibly powerful state. It ruled a vast area that included much of the Middle East. Within this large empire, there were diverse communities with different backgrounds, languages, and religions. The Ottoman rulers managed to control these various groups for a long time, keeping the empire unified in the 1800s. The British Empire grew stronger and stronger, and Britain began focusing more on the Middle East. This region was strategically vital for Britain's trade and power because it provided the most direct route to India. Britain's largest and richest colony, Britain wanted to ensure the sea route was safe and fast. To achieve this, Britain started gaining control or influence in areas along the route. They formed agreements called protectorates with local rulers. This gave Britain power over areas like the lands that are now the UAE, southern Yemen, and Bahrain, starting in the early 1800s. A significant achievement was the Suez Canal in Egypt. It was completed in 1868. This artificial waterway allowed ships to travel from the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea, cutting months off the journey to India. The canal was primarily owned by British and French businesses. Britain viewed the Suez Canal as essential for its empire and took control of Egypt in 1888 to protect access. Britain also gained protectorates over Oman and Kuwait. Secret plans and conflicting promises. In 1914, World War I began in Europe. The Ottoman Empire decided to join the war alongside Germany and its allies, putting it against Britain and France. Britain and France decided that once the war ended, the Ottoman Empire had to be dismantled. So, in 1916, two diplomats, Mark Sykes from Britain and Georges-Picot from France, met in secret. They created a plan called the Sykes-Picot Agreement. This plan outlined how Britain and France would divide the Ottoman lands in the Middle East between themselves. They drew lines on a map that ignored where different ethnic or religious groups lived together. Instead, they often used the old administrative borders of the Ottoman Empire, which also didn't follow ethnic or religious lines. They planned for Britain to control certain areas, France to control others, and Palestine to be managed in a special international way. At the same time, Britain made promises to different groups to help win the war. To encourage Arab leaders to revolt against the Ottomans, some British officials promised to support the creation of a large independent Arab state covering much of the region. However, later in 1917, Britain also issued the Balfour Declaration. This public statement promised British support for a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. These conflicting promises created significant future problems for the region. The rise of oil was also becoming incredibly important globally. It was discovered in parts of the Middle East, starting with Iran in 1908. The needs of the war, with its ships, tanks, and planes, highlighted how essential oil was. While the United States was the main supplier, Britain wanted to find its own large sources. Britain believed there were huge amounts of oil hidden in the Ottoman lands. Gaining control of these oil-rich areas became another major reason for Britain and other European powers to be interested in the Middle East. These secret plans, conflicting promises, and the desire for resources like oil by distant countries set the stage for many future events and problems in the Middle East after World War I, shaping new nations after World War I ended. The winning countries began drawing new maps for the Middle East. They met and made plans for the former Ottoman Empire lands, often without much consideration for the people who lived there. In 1920, the Treaty of Sèvres was made, which was very harsh on the Ottoman Empire. It aimed to split the land into many pieces, giving some areas to other countries and planning for new states like Armenia and a state for the Kurdish people. However, the Turks resisted this treaty and fought back against the winning countries. The Turkish army was strong and won battles, forcing the winning countries to renegotiate. In 1923, a new treaty, the Treaty of Lausanne, was made. This treaty was more favorable to Turkey and set the borders for the modern country of Turkey that we know today. By 1923, the main borders for many countries in the Middle East were established. But this new map created problems for many people. For example, the Kurdish people did not get their own country. They were spread across the borders of new nations like Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. Today, the Kurds are a large group of people who still do not have their own state, artificial borders, and internal conflict. Britain was given control over an area called Mesopotamia. They combined three old Ottoman areas, Mosul, Baghdad, and Basra. These areas had very different populations. Mosul was mostly Kurdish, Baghdad mostly Sunni Arab, and Basra mostly Shia Arab. Combining them to create the country of Iraq created problems because these groups were so distinct. Britain also separated the area that became Kuwait from Busra, which caused future disputes. Iraq gained independence in 1932. France was given control over other areas, creating the countries of Syria and Lebanon. Lebanon was made separate because it had a higher Christian population than other areas, but it also had many Muslim people. Syria was formed by combining different areas with many diverse groups, including Sunni Arabs, Alawite Arabs, and Kurds. France did not draw the borders to match where different groups lived, leading to future trouble. Early on, there were border arguments. In the 1930s, Turkey wanted an area from Syria called Hatay because many Turkish people lived there. France allowed Hatay to become separate. It joined Turkey in 1939. Syria still claims this land belongs to them. Oil and escalating. Tensions oil began to be discovered in the Middle East many years ago. With an early find in Iran in 1908, a very large discovery in the Arab lands was made in Iraq in 1927. Later, more oil was found in other countries like Saudi Arabia and Kuwait in the late 1930s. Oil was also found in Syria and the United Arab Emirates later in the 1950s together. These countries held a massive amount of the world's oil supply, however. The location of oil within these new countries caused significant problems. Oil was often found in areas inhabited by different ethnic or religious groups, who were sometimes minorities compared to the country's main population. For instance, in Iraq, much oil was found in the north and south, areas with Sunni Kurds, and Shia Arabs, but not in the central area where Sunni Arabs were more common. In Saudi Arabia, almost all the oil was found in the eastern part of the country, near the sea, where a Shia Muslim minority lived. Finding oil in these specific places worsened internal problems. Foreign interference and conflict. Central governments, often led by the majority group, wanted strong control over the oil areas to secure the wealth. But the local groups living there sometimes felt they didn't get a fair share of the money or power from the oil on their land. This disparity created deep tensions and distrust between these groups and the government. Outside, countries were also highly interested in the Middle East's oil. Britain was involved early, controlling oil in Iran. World War I demonstrated how essential oil was to power armies, navies, and new machines like airplanes. Britain wanted to ensure it had enough oil for the future. The United States also needed oil and became more interested in the Middle East, especially after World War II. These foreign powers, like Britain and later the USA, began to compete fiercely. They wanted access to the oil and control over who sold it and where it went. This competition for oil made the region's politics very complicated and unstable. The immense wealth generated from oil became a major source of conflict. Oil money could be used to buy weapons and fund groups. Because of the oil, many countries from outside the Middle East became involved in the region's issues. They often supported different sides in local conflicts to protect their own interests. And access to the oil? This outside interference added another layer of trouble, contributing to more wars and instability in the Middle East over many years. The birth of Israel and regional and regional wars, the British held a mandate in Palestine. More and more Jewish people immigrated there, especially after the horrific events in Europe known as the Holocaust. This significantly altered the demographics of Palestine. In 1947, the United Nations proposed a plan to divide Palestine into two states, one for Arab people and one for Jewish people. The holy city of Jerusalem would be special, under international control. Many Jewish groups accepted the plan, but most Arab groups did not. They believed the plan was unfair because it allocated more land to the Jewish state despite a much larger Arab population living there. Fighting began between Arab and Jewish groups in 1948. When the British withdrew, the State of Israel announced its independence. This marked the beginning of the long-standing conflict between Arabs and Israelis. Several Arab countries went to war to assist the Palestinian Arabs, but Israel won. After the war, Israel controlled more land than the United Nations plan had suggested. They took their planned land plus much of the land intended for the Arab state. Jordan took control of the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and Egypt took control of the Gaza Strip. No independent Arab state was created for the Palestinians. Approximately 700,000 Palestinian Arabs were forced to leave their homes, becoming refugees. This event is called the Nakba, meaning catastrophe in Arabic. Many of these refugees went to nearby countries like Lebanon. At the same time, many more Jewish people immigrated to Israel, Arab nationalism, and continued conflict of Tafter. The Arab defeat in 1948, a new leader gained prominence in Egypt, Gamal Abdel Nasser. He championed Arab nationalism, the idea that Arab countries should be united and strong. Nasser aimed to unite Arab lands and leverage the power of oil against Israel in countries like the United States. He became the leader of Egypt in 1954. In 1956, Nasser took control of the Suez Canal, a vital shipping route previously controlled by Britain and France. Britain, France, and Israel then attacked Egypt to regain the canal. However, the United States and the Soviet Union opposed this attack. Egypt emerged victorious, and Nasser became incredibly popular in the Arab world. Later, in 1967, another major war erupted. Israel launched a surprise attack on Egypt, Jordan, and Syria in what became known as the Six-Day War. Israel won quickly, seizing control of new areas, the Golan Heights from Syria, the West Bank and East Jerusalem from Jordan, and the Gaza Strip and the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt. After this war, Israel controlled significantly more land. Israeli settlers began building homes in these newly taken areas, creating more problems and conflict for the future. Nasser was weakened by the defeat and died a few years later. Shifting powers, lasting wars in the late 1960s, Britain announced it would withdraw from the Middle East, moving its forces from areas east of the Suez Canal. This created a power vacuum. The United States began to play a more significant role in the region, particularly near the Persian Gulf, aiming to ensure oil remained safe and available globally. This was seen as crucial for global trade and energy security. However, these actions and the existing governments faced challenges from new forces. Sunni Islamist extremist groups like Al-Qaeda grew stronger. These groups opposed the current governments in many Middle Eastern countries, as well as the power and presence of Western nations in the region. A primary goal for these groups was to eliminate the borders that Britain and France had created after World War I, believing these borders unfairly divided Muslim people and their lands. Later, a group called ISIS became very prominent. ISIS was an even more extreme offshoot, with countries like